Hello Transport Nerds, welcome back to Talking Planning, and today we're going to do a Q&A session. So it's been a hot minute since I actually asked some questions last time. In fact, it's been a month. I've had a few other episodes I've wanted to push out and film and finish up, but also there's been a lot happening with work. These are things you've got to deal with in adult life. So let's get to our first question right after this intro now. Alrighty, so let's start with our first question, which is, what made you want to do transport reviews? So quite frankly, I actually started Talking Planning during lockdown, and because of that, I really only did talkback videos. And once things opened up, I started to travel a little bit more. In fact, my very first travelling-based review was of the 4th Gen City Cats, which were quite new out in Brisbane at the time, so I thought I'd go on board, check it out, and that review did way better than most of my talkback style videos, so it kind of just stuck and I went with it. So why do I like transport? Pretty simply, Australia, Canada and the US are really car dependent countries, and I think it's really important to showcase that there is another option. And that's why occasionally you'll also hear me talk about active transport rather than just public transport. Active transport is a really great method of getting around. If you haven't heard of the jargon before, active transport's effectively modes like walking and cycling, skateboarding, rollerblading, all of those sorts of modes where it's effectively human powered. The combination of active and public transport is great for environmental, social and health outcomes. So that's one of the reasons I also started this channel, because I think it's partly an interest thing, but a lot of it's also advocacy based. And that's why I don't just tend to review old buses, trains, trams and ferries. I throw a bit of everything in the mix, and I don't specialise on one thing. So why did I start enjoying public transport in the very first place? Quite frankly, public transport offers cheap freedom. Even the cheapest car costs, several $1,000s a year to register, insure, service and put fuel in it. And quite frankly, they can break down, and when that happens, that gets really expensive. The other great thing about using public transport is you get incidental exercise. That walking or cycling in between, your place of residence or your destination and that transport node is really good for you. But I always find it funny when people talk about exercise and they get in their overloaded SUV, drive to the gym, work out, drive back, when quite frankly they may have been able to get good incidental exercise on their way to and from their destination without having to do all the driving. Another question, I think a little bit misguided. Are you happy about the COVID-19 cure? I would love a COVID-19 cure. Unfortunately, that doesn't quite exist. Vaccination, on the other hand, great. I would love to get one. And quite frankly, as soon as it's available, I will be rocking straight up to the nearest health clinic, getting one jabbed in the arm, and I'll be a happy bloke. Hot take, lockdown sucks. I'm very lucky being in Newcastle that we've fared fairly well and haven't had too many of them, but go a couple of council areas that way and things aren't so rosy. In fact, as this video is out now, Greater Sydney, Central Coast, Woolongong and Shellharbour are currently in lockdown. So if you're watching from any of those areas, stay safe. We're all with you and best of luck to get through it all. Okay, this one's a little bit back on track again. So why did I decide to go into the planning industry? And quite frankly, this could be an episode in of itself. My very first passion has always been aviation. I've loved it since I was a kid, quite frankly. And for a long time I wanted to be a pilot. Unfortunately, my mathematics skills were just not there, and I pulled the pin in, I think, about year 11 and decided to look at a different career option. Yeah, and from there I decided to get into planning, what I ended up doing is I was doing geography in high school amongst a bunch of other subjects. And we had a pretty good geography program at our school, so I was getting decent results, and that kind of shifted me towards the urban planning direction. And you know what? Applied for it at uni, got there, actually got a guaranteed acceptance, so pretty happy about that. And then the rest is history. Will I try some long distance trains in the future? Short answer, I would love to. And I think the challenge is YouTube is a passion and not a career for me. My priorities are in my work. My priorities are in the urban planning industry, the transport industry, and setting up a career in that space. So as much as I love creating a lot of these videos, they're not really, unfortunately, top of the priority list. So long distance trips are a little bit harder to schedule into that sort of life. It basically relies on some more time off. It's quite hard to travel far in a weekend. And, you know, as I've said previously, work has been busy, so I really haven't taken much time off. Of course, I have actually done one long distance travel review, and that was my tilt train video from Bundaberg to Brisbane, and that did really well. In fact, it's still my most popular video. But in terms of others, let's just say we'll see. I'd love to, but just a few little limiting factors. Now, another question, which I find a really good one, is about the future of private transport. Now, I can say all I want about how great public transport is and active transport, but the truth of the matter is it is very difficult, and it would take a lot of social shift to move from widespread use of private transport through to widespread use of public transport, especially when driving in Australia is a very easy thing to do. Sure, there might be lots of costs with registering and owning a car. A heck of a lot of the operation of your private vehicle is subsidised. Think about parking. There are some great books and resources about parking. And we talk about free parking. Of course, if you follow any economics theory or things like that, you'll know nothing is truly free. And the same goes for parking. In fact, it's usually one of the biggest expenditures of a local government. On that space, let's get back to the actual question, and that is looking at electric vehicles, hybrids, or preserving combustion engines. What's my opinion on the future? I think electrification with renewable power is just the smart way to move forward. You know, the truth is, zero emissions is a very attractive proposition. You always will get a few people saying, but what if you power the vehicle by coal? Then it's not a zero emissions vehicle, even if it's electric. That might be true, but even if you power an electric car with coal-fired power, it is zero tailpipe emissions. So if you're on a crowded, busy street, if you've got a diesel or a petrol car driving along, there will be CO2 coming out of that exhaust as it's driving along in that busy, urban, crowded centre. If you've got an electric vehicle, even if it's powered by non-renewable energy and that's a polluting energy source, you won't have pollution at the source of that vehicle. So, in terms of electrification, I think it's a pretty logical step. And truth be told, because electrification is still quite niche in Australia, only people who are really, really interested in doing it are actually doing it. And typically, if you're very keen to be early on in the electrification of transport space, in most cases, you're pretty keen on renewable energy to power it as well. I think another option we need to talk about is hydrogen. It's still very early days, but it's, I think, an energy source that is great for people who are not so sure on electrification. We talk about this concept of range anxiety, and it's the idea that if you run out of electricity, you're stranded. Well, truth be told, if you run out of petrol or diesel, you're stranded too. I think where people's concerns come in is the fact that, typically speaking, an electric vehicle takes longer to charge than a petrol vehicle takes to put petrol in. I think it might be a good option for people who are scared of that sort of thing. Hydrogen also gives you the advantage of being able to fill up really quickly on the go. And I think it's a good stepping stone for people who are very familiar with the idea you drive 500 Ks, you put something in a tank, fill it up in a few minutes, and then you can keep going. I think one of the other things we need to talk about is the petrol head community, or gearhead, or whatever you want to call the car enthusiast community. There is a lot of people in that space who are very, let's just say, concerned that electrification is going to remove driving pleasure. And I am a bit of a car enthusiast myself, and this will be explored in further videos. And I do kind of see that point. There is a sort of mechanical interfacing that cars offer that people do enjoy. And I can be guilty of that myself, quite frankly. So it's not going to be an easy transition. I just do think it's important that we don't focus on maintaining the status quo and acting exactly like we have now if it's going to cost us so much worse in the future. What is my biggest pet peeve on the Instagram transport community? Oh boy, this could be another video topic in of itself. But I think the big thing that I find frustrating about this sort of transport community is people just don't respect limits. How do I put it? There's a lot of younger people in that space who perhaps are still school-aged or quite, green in experience, or may not be quite as socially involved. And I understand that. I guess one of the challenges is that can turn people off this whole transport community. If you don't respect people's limits, I can't respond to every request, respond to every message, make every video that gets requested, or just upgrade equipment like that. Things take time, money, and patience. And also, why on earth do you just sometimes send random pictures to ruin someone's day? Think a little bit before you get on your keyboard and get typing away. It can get really frustrating, and I've seen lots of people leave transport communities because of this sort of behaviour. So I think it's really important that if you want to be a part of this community, act like it. And that leads me into something I do want to really talk about. And that is about request comments. So I do get quite a few request comments on my channel, and I think it's really important to set the record straight. There's a lot of reasons why I effectively just don't do requests. The first one is I work full time. I simply don't have time to edit or record during the week in most cases. Quite frankly, by the time you get home, you just want to have a bit of a break. The other thing is I've moved out on my own, so things are expensive. You've got rent, electricity, petrol, insurances, registration, health insurance, contents insurance, phone, internet, PO boxes, and there's a bunch of bills coming in. So if a review is going to cost me lots of money to make, or equipment to make a review is going to cost me lots, I've got quite a few other financial decisions that I need to weigh up first. Why would I bother doing a review if you're just going to be pushy or rude about it? If I'm going to take time out of my day and spend hours and hours doing something, and effectively with very little reward, why should I do that if you're just going to be rude or pestering? There's no motivation in that, there's no balance, and quite frankly, I'm not standing for it, and I encourage anyone else who makes transport content out there not to stand for it either. The other thing is, I've possibly already recorded something similar, or I just need to edit it. Generally speaking, if I've got 1 minute of footage that goes into a final video, that's taken an hour to create of scripting, editing, rendering, and uploading. So most of those 5-minute bus week episodes that you see, they take 4 to 5 hours each to make. So a whole bus week series is about 20 hours work on average, which is quite a lot. Another key thing is, I've already got footage for quite a lot of future episodes. As if I want to do something, I want to be quite opportune about it. And if I see a vehicle or something that I really want to review, I just get the footage while I can. Because it might not come up for another, who knows how long it might take to get back there and do something. So I'll get the footage whenever I can. I also need to talk about style. There is a reason I have the certain style of video that I do. I generally work with slightly longer format videos and voiceovers because I know it works. It's something that I've followed in the aviation community and I've really liked. And I think there's a couple of other sort of transport and urban exploring YouTubers who do it really well. People like Jeff Marshall and the Tim Traveller. And they're videos that do really well because they don't just have to appeal to a pure transport nerd audience. There are people who've got very limited interest in transport that watch those videos because of the narration style, the slightly quirky humour, and a nice delivery method, and that's something that I'm trying to channel in the way I do things. The other thing is, I don't really enjoy watching just plain footage videos. Because I don't enjoy them, I don't see a need to upload something that I wouldn't enjoy watching. A lot of the time, a review that I'd love to make would require taking time off work. I don't really have that as an easy option. There's delegations and responsibilities as part of my role, so I can't really just go and call the boss and say, hey, I'm not coming in tomorrow, I'm filming a vlog. It just isn't really an option. And don't get me wrong, the workplace I'm with is really flexible and does some great stuff, but there are limits to that as well. I live in Newcastle, so anything that's Sydney-based requires a 2.5-hour train trip, and quite frankly, at the moment, definitely not going to Sydney. Just about any review you're going to see, probably for quite some time, is going to be pre-recorded content anyway. Brisbane's also an hour flight away, and, at least $65 each way minimum on a really good sale. I've certainly spent a lot more than that on flights, so it's not something that I can just do out of whim or, every weekend, for example. If I don't do a certain type of video or I reply with an answer that you don't like, just have a little bit of a think about why. And I'd like to say thank you for all of you who do understand this. Chances are you're in a similar boat, you make your own content, you've got things that you need to do in your life, and quite frankly, you can't always just take requests and do whatever someone else wants. So for all of you who do understand, I want to say a big cheers and thank you very much. So thanks for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this sort of Q&A session, and I will see you again soon.